Hello, and thank you for listening to the 124th episode of Congressional Dish. I'm your host, Jennifer Briney. If this is your first time checking out this show, Congressional Dish is about your government. It's not about campaigns. It's about what your government is doing in your name and how the laws are changing and how it affects you. And that definitely includes where your tax money is going. We all just paid our taxes on April 15th and we're all super mad about it. And so this is an episode that's not going to make you feel any better because this episode is about defense contracting, and it's a rabbit hole that exposed one rabbit hole after another, after another, after another. And so actually this episode is based off of a episode of Ari Shaffir's Skeptic Tank that I listened to while I was traveling back and forth to Seattle. As many of you know who listened to the last episode, that we recently in my family experienced a terrible tragedy. We lost someone that we love very much. And so I've been traveling a lot, and a lot of airplanes, a lot of subways, and I was listening to Ari Shaffir's podcast. Now, if you are easily offended, I cannot recommend Ari Shaffir's podcast to you. But if you are not easily offended, if you're someone like me who finds Ari Shaffir to be hilarious, I really enjoy Skeptic Tank. And so that's what I was listening to. I was listening to episode 257, Money for Nothing. And this episode was about two defense contractors, and they were anonymous on the show. But Ari had met them and was amazed by the stuff that they had discussed. And so he had these two guys on his podcast, and they discussed a lot of things related to being a defense contractor. And so I was just listening to this episode and I was really blown away by a lot of the information that I was being given. I mean, when we think of defense contracting, I think a lot of us think of Blackwater. And Blackwater is a private security company in the Iraq war years. Blackwater, they killed a bunch of Iraqi citizens. I think that there were like 17 of them that died in this massacre. And I think that is probably what we think of the most when it comes to defense contracting. But that's only one small piece of defense contracting. Granted, it's an important one, these security contractors, but it turns out we have a lot more contractors doing a lot more stuff than I was aware of. And so what I did is I listened to this episode of Ari Shaffir's Skeptic Tank. I was blown away by so much of it. And so today I'm going to share pieces of that podcast with you with Ari's permission. So thank you very much, Ari. But I'm going to share with you pieces of that podcast. And then because these two guys were anonymous, I looked up the stuff that they said to see if it was legit. And not only was most of it legit, but it was so much worse than they were even saying. So that's what this episode is. It's very clip heavy. I watched a lot of hearings. I read a lot of reports. And the thing is, it got to the point, I mean, I still have 4 reports sitting here on my desktop, on my laptop, that I didn't even get to. There was just so much information and so much to read that at a certain point, I just had to stop. There was just too much for me to handle. And so this will be a good episode. Not a typical episode. There's actually no specific bill related to this, but this is where an enormous chunk of our tax money is going. So I think it's something worth talking about. But before I get into the actual episode here and, jump down the defense contracting rabbit hole, there are a few things I want to tell you about. So first up, the podcast awards are back for 2016. And so if Congressional Dish is one of your favorite podcasts, I would love it if you would go to podcastawards.com and nominate Congressional Dish in the news and politics category. They changed the rules this year, not in a way that'll really affect you guys, but they changed the rules this year in a way that we might actually have a chance of winning this thing. And I'm not really sure how I feel about these changes in the rules, but hey, we might as well go for it, right? And so the way that this is going to work is between April 15th, which is already in the past, but between April 15th and April 30th, there's going to be a nomination period. And this is really where you can make the most difference, is by making Congressional Dish one of the nominees. And it's really easy. You can only nominate a host of shows once. And so you fill out the form, you do it once, and then that's it. That's the only time you can nominate shows. So make sure that not only when you're nominating Congressional Dish, go to the other categories and nominate your favorite shows there too. So you do that once between now and April 30th. And then after that, after they know who the nominees are, then there's going to be the voting period, and we'll deal with that when it comes. But for right now, if you can just go one time to www.podcastawards.com and make sure to nominate Congressional Dish in the news and politics category, that would be awesome. Also, I am really excited to announce finally that I have been selected to speak at Podcast Movement this year. Podcast Movement is the only convention for podcasters, and they've invited me to speak. And this is going to be my first big speaking gig. And I'm so excited to talk to the podcasting community. My speech is going to be about how to enhance your podcast. So, regular listeners to Congressional Dish will not be too surprised to learn that I'm going to teach people how to add sound clips to their episodes, how to add episode level artwork, because we have Only Child Imaginations. That is a company that's doing all of our artwork now for Congressional Dish. But for a while, it was just me. And so I know how to do it both ways. And so I'm going to teach people that and then just tell people how adding, valuable information leads to a more valuable podcast. So I'm really excited to give that talk. And if you are a podcaster or a aspiring podcaster or even a podcasting fan, Podcast Movement is going to be in Chicago this July. It's going to be the weekend after the 4th of July, which is July 8th through 10th. It is over a weekend. So if you'd like to join me there, I would love to meet you and speak to you in front of a lot of people. But anyway, that is happening. And then one more thing that's happening that's very important and why I wanted to tell you up front, because I need you. If you don't show up, then this idea is never going to work. But one of the things that I learned at Social Media Marketing World is that Facebook now has something called Facebook Live, which allows me to talk to you in real time. But even better, you guys can interact with me in the comments, which got me to thinking that one of the things that I was struggling with while at this conference was doing all of the research for this episode. One of the reasons that I picked this episode is because I'm so interested in the topic that I knew that I would be fine with researching in between sessions and, skipping networking events to go home to read congressional reports like a real winner. But that's what I did. In between sessions, I was outside on my computer, reading these reports. And the second night I skipped the harbor cruise and I read these reports. And the thing is, there's still so much more for me to read and so much more for me to learn. And there's things that I remember from the Bush years, some stories that I'll be telling you that just were in my brain. But it occurred to me that there's so many things that are in your brain that could really help Congressional Dish. And if we could find a way to collaborate on this, my research won't take me as long. And then maybe I can eventually get back to having more than 2 episodes a month. And so that's where Facebook Live comes in. What I'm thinking of doing, and actually I'm going to do if you'll be willing to show up and help me, is at 2 p.m. Pacific time on May 2nd. I'd like your help in researching some bills for the next episode. The next episode is going to be about some bills about the internet. And I don't have the bill numbers right now, but over the course of the next week, I'll gather these internet related bills and I'll let you know on the Congressional Dish Facebook page what those bills are going to be. But I'm going to read these bills. But every time I read these bills, I have all of these questions. And when it comes to the internet, I'm not on the level of, it's a series of tubes. I'm not that stupid when it comes to how the internet is run, but I'm also not too good at understanding the technical side of it. And some of these bills are very technical. So what I'm hoping to do is I'll read the bills and sit down and have questions. And hopefully you guys can help me with the research part, which is actually the most fun part for me to do. And so we can do it together. So if you're interested in helping me with these internet bills or just interested in watching how this goes, I'm going to start this at 2 p.m. Pacific time on the Congressional Dish Facebook page. And yes, there is a Congressional Dish Facebook page. So if you haven't liked it yet, please go to that page and like it. But if you guys can help me out with the research, what's really cool is when you comment after the session is over. So let's say we do this for an hour, hour and a half, whatever. After the session is over, that video is going to go to the Congressional Dish Facebook page so you can watch it whenever you want. But then I'll also have all your comments and all of your articles and everything you send me during our conversation will stay there. And so it's also a way for me to collect research. So this is going to be an experiment. I hope that it works because I think it could be a lot of fun for all of us. And I actually think it could really enhance the show by getting, the information in your brain to combine with the information in my brain. And all of a sudden we're all a lot smarter. So again, 2 p.m. on May 2nd on Facebook on the Congressional Dish Facebook page. I will be going live and I'm hoping you will join me there. But that's it for the upfront business. Let's get into the defense contracting stuff, shall we? So like I said, this whole thing started because I listened to a fascinating episode of Ari Shafir's Skeptic Tank, and it's episode number 257 titled Money for Nothing, and I will put a link to that in the show notes. Also, all of the stuff that I'm telling you, like always, all of this stuff is linked to in the show notes. I don't want you taking my word for anything. So all of the reports, all the hearings, everything I used to research this episode is in the show notes. So please use that resource for your own research because like I said, there is so much left to learn. But anyway, Ari Shafir talked to these two anonymous defense contractors, and I think it was very smart of them not to give their real names. But Ari called them Josh and Brandon. And so this first clip is Ari basically just finding out who one of them is.
So what did you guys do? What was your jobs?
I was a field service rep for like drilling like water wells.
What does that mean, field service rep?
So the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force all bought water well drilling rigs to drill wells on their remote bases over there, so they had water. The FSR is like a tech that goes along with the equipment that troubleshoots or helps them with any questions or anything like that. It's like a civilian on site to help the military with any drilling operations or anything like that.
So like what kind of questions do they have that they would need you?
Basic drilling questions. You know, they run into any problems with while they're drilling a hole. You know, what do we do here?
Because you have experience in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what my job in the military, that's what I was doing in Africa.
Setting up wells for people?
Yep.
And so you took that skill and you're like, I'll go private with it.
Yep.
And then here's what the other contractor did.
What did you do?
IT. So I was like a network engineer. So doing a computer shit.
Both mostly, I mean, you guys did you even have to get your hands dirty, Brandon?
No.
It was just overseeing stuff.
Yeah. And then they have their own mechanics. And if they needed to order parts, they'd order them through us. I'd put in the orders and get it to them.
But you never have to pick up heavy equipment or do any actual labor.
No.
Whoa. What are we, animals? Common folk?
Grunts.
No, they did everything, which is good training and experience for them. But, we were just there to say, hey, this
collect
is what
that
you gotta
paycheck.
do. Yeah.
And how much would the people you were overseeing get paid in the Army? Or whoever's doing
compared to our pay, I bet you 1/5 of what we're making.
Wow.
It's so crazy on how all the new recruits.
Yeah.
They look at you like you're a cash cow. Like, oh, they're just putting in their time until they can go to a private contract. Like that, the first 4 years.
Oh, really?
They all
just making connections and stuff.
Yeah.
Do they do that? Do they try to network and say like with you? Do they try to tell you like, hey, I'm going to be out in 6 months. I'd love to stay out here
for sure.
The
ones that are motivated to go somewhere. Yeah.
So for those of you who haven't caught on to this yet, basically what these guys are is one of them is a former member of the military and one of them is not. But these two guys, they went overseas to Afghanistan. That's where the two of them met. But these two guys go to Afghanistan and they're making 5 times more than the people that are in the military to do their jobs. One of them digging holes and one doing IT work. And that's what a contractor is. A contractor is someone that works for a private company that's still paid for by our tax money. I mean, they're hired by the Department of Defense or the Department of State or the USAID. Those are really like the big 3 of contracting overseas. But all of those things are funded by our tax money. So it's still tax money funding these people, but they work for private companies and they get paid a lot more than the people in the military. And here is how they described the money that they make as private contractors.
The money is just night and day.
What's the money? Well, I know there's no money for actually serving in the military, right? They give you like $4 a day.
Depends on your rank. Yeah.
Who makes more, prisoners or Army people?
Yeah. The higher rank, you can get paid pretty good because when you go overseas, they call it combat pay and hazard pay and stuff like that you get added onto your check. So it's okay.
Oh, they do that for commercials too. If you have to fall down steps, they give you an extra $20.
take one for the team.
Yeah. My friend Mike Black had to get pushed into one of those ping pong tables that would fold it up. So they had to fold them up in one. Yeah. So $20 extra, hazard pay.
All right.
And he was like, I don't know if that's worth the risk of me breaking something. So what's the pay for contractors?
It definitely depends on
what you're doing,
skill set.
Right. If you're a manager, do they have managers and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, every job that you would have, you have the same shit there. You know what I mean?
Right.
The hierarchy, like the program manager, like as a contractor, the PM of your contract would be the highest guy in the region, typically. but then it goes down to the guys that are like scrubbing floors or,
Right.
electricians or whatever. But if you're and keep in mind, this is the times changed. You got paid more if you were there like closer to the start date. Towards the end, it became like garbage pay.
Oh, so, really? Why?
The drawdown, like
and more people willing to do it, and more people knowing about the jobs that are available.
Oh, like so weed.
It became more.
The early days of weed, it was a cash grab, and now people like my friends are growers. Like you can barely make anything anymore because there's so many people growing that it's like
same type of thing, and like. Any skilled position though, you're easily over 150 a year.
Yeah,
really.
Like an IT guy will make $200,000 without question. Like, and it's
so it's the same as any type of job. Let's say that the building is building somewhere. They would have all the same positions, but the building's building there instead of in
that guy was
Kansas
making
City.
$120,000 a year.
And now in there, he'll make how much?
Well, like here, he probably makes $40,000 a year. He goes there, he's making $120,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it's federally the first $96,000 is tax free.
What?
Yeah. So
you guys don't pay any tax on the first $96,000?
Right.
That's an extra $35,000.
Yeah.
So that's the part of this that really blew me away. I had known about Blackwater. I knew that we had hired guns, but I didn't realize that we had hired hole diggers and these IT guys and people that build buildings, and just regular people were going over to Iraq and Afghanistan and doing these types of jobs. And then when I started reading the reports, it turns out that most of these people are regular people. The security contracting at any given time is between 10 and 20% of the contractors, which means that 80 to 90% of our contractors overseas are people doing these regular type jobs, only for a lot more money on the other side of the world. And so one of the questions I had is, how can these companies afford to pay these kind of rates, which, as you heard, are jobs that don't contribute much back into the U.S. tax money pool, considering that there's no taxes on the first $96,000 that these people make. And so in 2007, a freshman senator from Missouri, Claire McCaskill, who's still in the Senate, she wanted to look into what was going on with the private sector workers hired by the Department of Defense. And so along with Jim Webb, who you might know because he did try to run for president this year, running on his military experience, those two together created the Commission on Wartime Contracting in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, this commission worked for about 4 years, and their final report was released in 2011. And then the commission was dissolved, and so it no longer exists. But after their report was released, the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee held a hearing, during which they questioned the 5 members of the commission about their findings and conclusions. And so here is Senator Susan Collins of Maine from during that hearing.
Some of the examples are almost too astonishing to believe. For example, a July 2011 report by the Special Inspector General found that a DoD contractor was charging $900 for a control switch that was worth a mere $7. In some cases, the IG found contractors overbilling the government with markups ranging from 2,300% to more than 12,000%. Now, I think we all understand that when you're contracting in this environment, there is going to be some kind of premium, but this was absurd.
Overcharging 12,000%. That is absurd indeed. But overcharging us taxpayers is not the only way that these contracting companies are making a killing from the money that just came out of your pocket. These contractors also make use of the Apple method of making money, as in they release new versions of their products and get us suckers to keep on buying them. In this next clip from Ari Shafir's Skeptic Tank, you're going to hear a great explanation of how this is done. But in the example, one of the contractors refers to CRAM, and I want you to understand what that is when you hear it. So CRAM stands for Counter Rocket Artillery and Mortar, and it uses radar and cameras to detect incoming fire and alert the people on the base that a round is on its way to, kill them. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Powers, who's a task force commander in Afghanistan, he told the Washington Post in 2015 that CRAM, quote, typically provides a moment or two for service members and contractors on base to take cover both from the first round and any subsequent rockets fired in succession, unquote. And so we tax-paying suckers are being told that CRAM is a lifesaver. But here's what the private boots on the ground have to say about CRAM and the motives of the private company that sells it.
It's always in the best interest of the contractor to sell you a new version. So So that's how they grow these contracts. So they're like
to put mistakes in the place.
100%.
Oh wow!
So
because the head guy is like, I want this job next year, and I don't want to fix everything.
Like
Wow,
it's really fun because when the argument for all that stuff, like CRAM is like the rocket, the intel for rockets coming in or whatever.
Yeah.
And boomerang is they put an antenna all around the base, so if somebody's shooting in like sniper fire, they're going to know, triangulate where it came from. So like boomerang is that system. Never once did I get a boomerang notification that something was going on. It's always, even the CRAM,
even after it happened, where it's like that's when it should have been a boomerang notice.
right, there was it never went off. And then whenever in Bagram at least, where I primarily was at, the CRAM, it would always go off we called it the big voice. It would go off after the impact had already happened. You already heard the impact, and then it would go off. But
Damn.
as the contractor, the PM, it's an easy sell. Like, how much is a soldier's life worth? You know what I mean? Like, they can get that funded by Congress.
Yeah.
Like, well, don't you care about soldiers?
It's just $1 million. It's not coming out of your pocket.
Right. Like, don't you care about them?
All you have to do is devalue everyone's money by 1 penny per $20, and then we can just give these guys $1 million.
Right. So then they get 20 guys on the base to support that system, and then 6 months goes down the road, 8 months goes around, then they come out like, oh, version 2. That's really
All the bugs are fixed.
Yeah, they're all fixed, but we need 20 more people on the ground to support the system.
Wow.
It's just a snowball effect for 10 years. Like,
And that's how it got so out of control, too.
Yeah.
So by constantly having new versions, these companies can go to Congress and say, hey, we need more money, we need more people, and they get paid for every one of these services. Every employee that goes over there is more money and profit for these contractors. That's why they want more humans. And when it comes to CRAM, this thing that doesn't appear to work too well, it took a simple Google search for me to find so many contracts for it. So for instance, in February of 2009, Northrop Grumman, which is the manufacturer of the CRAM system, Northrop Grumman got a $58 million contract to install CRAM in Iraq. 1 year later, they got a $219 million contract to provide more employees to operate CRAM in Afghanistan. 1 year after that, October 2011, Northrop Grumman got a $48 million contract for more employees to operate CRAM in Afghanistan and Iraq. A year later, they got another $122 million contract to install a new version of CRAM at bases in Afghanistan and Iraq. The next year, August 2013, they got a $157 million contract to provide supplies, services, and maintenance of CRAM in Carson, California. That's not even overseas. Then in April 2015, they got a $38 million contract to upgrade software maintenance and training for CRAM. And then just last month, March of 2016, Northrop Grumman got another $71.7 million contract for hardware and services for CRAM. According to Northrop Grumman's 2015 investor report, quote, the estimated value of contract awards recorded during 2015 was $21.3 billion, unquote, for one company. And how much of that is being paid by us? Well, also according to their 2015 investor report, their largest customer is the U.S. government, and sales to our government account for 83% of their business in 2015. So how much of that $21.3 billion is coming from us? Damn near most of it. Northrop Grumman and companies like it are basically an arm of our government now if they're getting that much of their money from taxpayers. But the difference is that this company gets to take a good chunk of the money that it's given and put it in the pockets of individuals who bet on the company in the stock market. That's what profit is. That's where it goes, to shareholders. But that's our tax money that is funding this. And so how does Northrop Grumman keep this sweetheart deal going? How do they keep getting contracts for a product that doesn't appear to work all that well? Well, all they need to do is get the money from Congress, which is probably why they invest so much money influencing Congress. In 2015, Northrop Grumman spent $10 million lobbying our Congress, but in 2013, it was $20 million. Northrop Grumman employs 49 lobbyists, 33 of whom used to have government jobs. And then they also give money directly to congressmen. For the last election, they handed out $4 million in campaign contributions, and $2.6 million of that went directly to candidates in both of the big two parties. And so what they get in return for that is taxpayer money with very little oversight in what happens to it after it goes to Northrop Grumman. That's what institutionalized corruption looks like. And the result of that is often a lot of waste.
How much waste is there? There's tons of waste. You were telling me a little yesterday. What was that thing you said about the printer?
So GSA pricing is for anything that the government wants to buy. You have to get it GSA approved. They negotiate special pricing for it.
What's GSA stand for?
General supply.
Okay. That's good enough. Yeah.
Sounds
It's a
right.
supply-
America.
Supply code. Yeah.
So they, rather than, like, the guy is so lazy to go through that process to get toner on that list.
Yeah.
They would go to the Connex and get a brand new printer, pull the toner out, shred the printer, and go deliver the toner. And keep in mind,
Shred the printer? What do you mean? Just trash it?
We don't want it, or else it just takes up space. What do you, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You only got a certain amount of space, connexes and everything, distortion. So it's like, yep, toss it.
And no one could possibly be fired for that kind of wastefulness. They wouldn't come down to one person.
it would get buried in the paperwork. Like,
Yeah. I mean, if it got found out, what's the worst that would happen? Would somebody say, like, hey, don't do that anymore? Just buy toner?
You're supposed to be liable for that, like the hand receipt. Like, they're supposed to be keeping detailed with.
But there's things called like field loss and stuff like that where, just put it on the field loss and it's gone.
Acceptable losses.
Yeah,
Right.
it's gone. Yeah.
But that's
Wow.
on such a small scale. You have to keep in mind, like, every computer workstation that was deployed for where I was working at,
Yeah.
they had 3 computers sitting on, every employee had 3 computers sitting on their desk. So they had 3 times the printers, 3 times the servers, because they have classified, unclassified, and international classified. So
They could only use each computer for each thing?
yes,
Wow.
so everybody's desk had 3 computers on it. I mean, it's just crazy the amount.
Then there's separate networks for all 3 of those too.
Right. You have to have separate cabling. You have to have separate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they have to be a certain distance apart. so-
Separate networks.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's insane. But that's on such a small scale. On my second contract, we were hired to virtualize their data center. So really kind of get it organized. Every data center would send all their data up to one of the major sites like Kabul,
Yeah.
Bagram, or Kandahar, or Ramal. So we were pulling out these data centers. There's 2 versions of them. One was a $4 million and the other one was $7 million. These servers had never been turned on and we're already replacing them,
Wow.
sending them to the shredder. They've never even been turned on.
Wow. Sending to the shred. You can't even like donate it to a school somewhere.
Whoa. No. It's classified. You can't.
You haven't even used it yet. What's classified? Nothing's done there yet.
Yeah. That's how bad it is.
That's nothing though.
That's like saying, Ari, here's a whatever, and they put it in this condo, and then it was like, oh, we need it back. It's like, oh, it's already been in your condo. That means
It's dirty.
Anything could be in there.
the way those contracts work, if a civilian company gets contracted to do this amount of work, they're going to do it no matter whether it's needed or not.
They're not going to say, hey guys, you can actually save cash.
Yeah, we actually don't need this.
That's all budgets are like that.
Yeah.
The money's been expensed.
Yeah,
Deal
it's
with
been
it.
expense. Do it. Send it. Doesn't matter if they need it or not.
Yeah.
Still, yeah.
Well, in the same concept,
Lame.
if they would just stop that shit,
Yeah.
you could pay for healthcare and all that stuff easily. Without
You're not even saying don't put money into defense. You're saying just don't waste money.
right.
Yeah. Continue to putting the same useful money into
Right.
defense.
I'm all for that useful defense money.
Right.
Just don't waste it.
How insane is that? And the thing is, like, when they talk about the printers, I find it interesting that they took the printers and they shredded them, because we used to not have shredders in Afghanistan and Iraq. They used to just take all of this stuff that they were throwing away and put it in burn pits. And so they would literally, like, in that scenario that they told us here, they would take out the toner, use the toner, and throw the printer in these burn pits. And it was all kinds of equipment that they just wanted to just like disappear. So the computers that they didn't use but were being replaced, they would just throw it all in these giant pits and burn it. And it made contractors and military personnel really, really sick because they were breathing in all of those toxins. And so how did we deal with that problem? Well, apparently we didn't deal with the problem of waste. We just got them shredders instead of burn pits. But the waste is still happening, clearly, based on those stories. And the thing is, it's not just the contracts for physical stuff like CRAM and printers that's gotten out of control. Also, the contracts for human beings has gotten out of control. Here's another clip from Ari Shafir's Skeptic Tank.
I mean, there's just the contractors towards the end outnumbered the soldiers on the ground like 3-1.
Wow.
Yeah.
Last year there was 100,000 people that they didn't know what we're doing in Afghanistan. Contractors.
What do you mean didn't know what we're doing?
The Office of Personnel Management, like, they didn't have any idea what they were doing there.
What are these people doing over here?
Yeah, they're just sending money. Like, there's 100,000 people that you're paying over $100,000 a year.
And Congress is completely aware of this. This is from that hearing in 2011. This is Chris Shays again. He was the guy who's a former congressman, but then served on the Commission of Wartime Contracting. This is him telling Congress to their faces what the situation is with contracting.
Could I just make sure that we're clear that literally half of the personnel in theater are contractors?
So that was in 2011 when Congress was told that the proportions of, government people to private people was getting a little out of hand. And since then, it's only gotten worse in Afghanistan. According to a Congressional Research Service report released 5 months ago in December 2015, we have a little over 9,000 troops in Afghanistan and 30,000 contractors. So like this guy told Ari, in Afghanistan, we have 3 contractors for every 1 actual member of the military. And then in Iraq, even though we technically left Iraq in early 2012, our contractors never did. And unfortunately, I can't give you exact numbers on how many we still have now because the numbers being collected and released by the Defense Department are super sketchy. What I can tell you is that we have approximately 3,500 troops and almost 1,400 contractors. But what I find interesting about those numbers is that both of them are trending in the up direction over the course of the last year, which is something that they definitely are not advertising to us Americans on the news. We are going back into Iraq more and more every single month. But that's just for the Department of Defense, that 3-to-1 ratio. It gets way worse when you talk about the Department of State and USAID, which are the other 2 branches of our government that have heavy overseas presences. And so for presences, is that a word? But anyway, for the Department of State, for every 1 state employee, we have 18 contractors. And for USAID, for every 1 USAID employee, we have 100 private contractors. Now, what's really interesting about these contractors is that actually very few of them are making the type of money that the 2 guys that talked to Ari are making. When you have a U.S. citizen that gets into this private contracting game, they make a killing. But 80% of these contractor employees are not U.S. citizens. They are either local people or third country nationals, which means that we don't know where the hell they come from, but it sure isn't the United States. And because they're not protected by U.S. laws, they can be paid less. And so that's why when you hear conversations about private contracting being cheaper, well, for 20% of the people that are private contracting, it's not cheaper. It's way more expensive. But 80%, because we're using foreign labor, it is cheaper. The following clip is of Dov Zakim. I don't know how to say his name. But this guy is the former comptroller of the Department of Defense, and he was there during the beginning of the Bush administration. So this guy is an insider for the Defense Department during the time of our country when we were launching both of these wars. He was there from 2001 to 2004. And he was also one of the people that was on the Commission for Wartime Contracting. This is what he told Senator Joe Lieberman in that hearing from 2011 after the commission released their report.
One of the reasons that they're cheaper is we use local nationals. Obviously, a local national is going to be cheaper. But then that's where so much of the corruption problems come in. Plus, very often we found, and we reported on this, these people are exploited. This is the abuse side of the equation. We've talked about waste, we've talked about fraud. This is the abuse side. So it's both what my esteemed co-chairman said.
You mean exploited by us?
Exploited by their own contractors, by the people who hire them.
And so basically what you have here are giant for-profit companies that are hiring people who are not U.S. citizens because you can pay them less because they're not protected by U.S. labor laws. Sounds a lot like the game that's going on with free trade, doesn't it? Because that's the same exact game with the TPP and NAFTA and CAFTA and all these different trade agreements that allow big companies to get their labor from overseas. The same crap is happening with private contracting. Now, when it comes to costs, I would really love to give you the number right now of all of the costs since the beginning of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, but I physically cannot do this. So I'm prepared to be enraged. The reason I can't give you that data is that the Department of Defense did not collect or release data on contractors until the second half of 2007. So from the time we launched the Afghanistan war at the end of 2001 until the second half of 2007, we have no idea what went on. There was no one investigating contracting. There's no data. There's no information at all. What I can tell you is that since the Department of Defense started, keeping track, From 2007 to 2014, our total defense contracts have equaled $215.2 billion. And for some context, that's enough money to send 23 million kids to public in-state colleges. So when people tell you that it's impossible for us to have healthcare, it's impossible for us to pay for kids to go to college, no, it's not. If we shifted our tax money out of this empire building thing we're doing, especially for profit, and shifted it to our own kids, we could send 23 million of them to college in 7 years. That's an enormous amount of money. And what's crazy about this money, I keep saying that, what's crazy? This whole thing is crazy. But one of the things that kind of blew me away is that most of these contract dollars are awarded to just a few large companies. And number one on the list by far is a company that many of us have heard of, KBR. Now, the reason that KBR is probably making your brain tingle a little bit is that KBR is a part of Halliburton, which was Dick Cheney's company. And so let me tell you how this went down. From 1989 to 1993, Dick Cheney was the defense secretary under Poppy Bush. Then during the Clinton years, when Republicans were, fired, Dick Cheney moved on to become the president and CEO of Halliburton, which owns KBR. So the relationship between Halliburton and KBR, it's kind of like how Yum Brands owns KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell. They each have different names, but it's the same damn company. And so KBR and Halliburton have that thing going. And so Dick Cheney becomes the president and CEO of Halliburton / KBR. And then when he becomes the vice president, his company, KBR, became the biggest contractor in the two wars that his administration started. A war that was privatized to an extent never seen before in U.S. history. Now, this is a quote from a 2009 Inspector General report. Quote, in World War II, one contractor was deployed for every 7 soldiers. During the 2003 invasion, that number had increased to 1 for every 2.4. By 2006, contractors outnumbered soldiers in Iraq, unquote. So this really is unprecedented. And so many of those contractors worked for KBR. And the thing is, when you look at the numbers, KBR, they were definitely the biggest benefactor here, because when you have, so this graph that I'm looking at, which will be in the show notes, it shows you how much money has been made by these individual companies from 2002 to 2011. And KBR made $40.8 billion, which is just an unfathomable amount of money. Number 2 on the list is miscellaneous foreign contractors at 38.5. So that's all kinds of shady. We don't even know who they are. But the next company on the list, that's one company, made $9 billion. So when you look at the individual companies, you have KBR at number 1, $40.8 billion. And then the next one is a company called Agility that made $9 billion. So KBR in particular just made a killing on these wars. And the way that this was done is that they were given a contract in December of 2001, right when we launched the Afghanistan war, that they would be the sole provider of the biggest contract that would ever be given out for doing, support type stuff. So KBR, they don't make a lot of their money in direct defense stuff. They do it by doing laundry and taking care of the computer networks and cleaning and cooking, that type of stuff. That's the contract that KBR got. And they got a 10-year contract with no competition. So that's how they made out so well. That company was paid over $40 billion by 2011. And then obviously they've been paid more since then, but I don't have an updated graph. And so, I'm sure that there's more than one person at this point who's probably wondering, how the hell does this get approved? How is this funded? Because I can tell you, there's nothing in the budget that says, here's $40 billion for KBR. It doesn't happen that way. And one of the reasons that this financial aspect of our war and our contracting has gotten so out of control is that for about 10 years, all of this war funding was designated as emergency spending and funded through what's called supplemental appropriations, which were outside of the budget. So every year we have these budget squabbles and we have appropriations bills, they're supposed to be carefully crafted. We can debate how careful they actually are. But the point is, at the end of the year, we say, this is how much our budget is. But the war budget was completely different and it didn't count as part of the budget. And so that was one of the big problems. One of the conclusions of the Commission on Wartime Contracting is that budgeting for war in this way, quote, obscures the full cost of contracting and creates the illusion that contractors in a war zone are a free resource, unquote. So here is a part of the hearing from 2011. This is current Senator John Tester of Montana speaking to Commission on Wartime Contracting member Catherine Shinasi.
I believe it was you, Catherine, that talked about emergency supplemental being looked at as free money. Wow. How does this happen? These are government taxpayer dollars, borrowed or otherwise, in this particular case. How do we get to a point where people within the government, military or otherwise, looks at any dollars as free? Can you give me any insight into that?
The lack of discipline in the supplemental allowed a lot of what Senator McCaskill was just talking about to occur, and that is just we can always get more money. We don't need to have any discipline in our requirements process because we can always get more money. And the corollary to that is that the contractors were also considered to be a free resource. So we never had to factor into our planning.
And were they considered a free resource because they were off budget or what?
They were off budget and they're not required. The government itself is constrained by what's called FTEs, full-time equivalents. So the number of government employees is capped. So you can keep putting missions on. In many cases, these were new missions that the agencies were taking on. They didn't have anybody to do it, so let's just go hire a contractor. And oh, by the way, we don't have to count that anywhere, either the money we spend or the people that we hire.
So at this point, I have a good news, bad news situation for you. That whole supplemental budgeting thing, like where we were funding our wars through supplemental appropriations, like the emergency ones, that is no longer done. The Obama administration did change that. And so now our wars are technically on the books. Here's the thing, though. We've had these issues with the budget. We had the sequester. We have these budget caps. And like she told you in that last clip, we have a cap on the number of government employees we're allowed to have. We have caps all over the place. Well, now our wars are funded through something called the Overseas Contingency Operations Account, the OCO account, and that is not subject to budget caps. So even though it's being funded differently, this whole war thing, it's still a way to fund things without any accountability. And so, for instance, last year, and this has been an issue ongoing. So last year, there was a big defense level budget fight that led to President Obama vetoing the first version of the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, that landed on his desk. And the whole beef was that the Republicans in Congress didn't like the caps on defense spending. And so they were putting a bunch of things in the Overseas Contingency Operations account because it didn't count towards the caps. Well, this year it's happening again. Here's a quote from Congressman Rodney Frelinghuysen of New Jersey from just last week. Quote, "We sort of got away from supplementals. So the OCO account in the minds of some people represents a supplemental and has always been something of a consternation to some people in that it's a fund that is quite fluid," unquote. So it's different. It's not a supplemental, but it's being treated like a supplemental because there's no caps. And so once again, we have this money pit that Congress doesn't have to account for, and companies, very powerful companies that fill Congress's campaign accounts with cash, they get paid from this money pit. And you end up with situations like this.
Like they paid us to sit around. There was times that I wasted 3 months without working because there was a work stoppage. Like the military told us not to do our job.
Why?
Because it's kind of a whole process for them to purchase things. So I would show up to these bases essentially unannounced. So whenever you get to Afghanistan, it takes you 3 months to figure out like what the hell's going on, like figuring out where to eat, like the process. So the guy that's making that decision, if he hasn't been deployed before, it takes him 3 months to figure out like what's going on, 3 months to identify a problem. And keep in mind, he only has like a 12-month deployment. So
it starts over every time.
Yeah. So then
wow.
It's painful.
Yeah. So at 6 months, he starts figuring out like, oh, we need vendors to come in and give us an idea on how to fix this particular problem, whatever it is. Keeping track of inventory or something. So a vendor comes out, he has to get multiple bids from different vendors. So that takes 3 months. So then 9 months into it, he signs an order to place an order. So by the time that arrives in theater,
he's gone.
And then the next guy's like, well, this stupid. Whenever it shows up, this is stupid. Let's put my name on this.
Right. And they starts all over again.
So what would happen is they were replacing data centers quicker than we could get them deployed. So then whenever I show up to a base, the guy would question why we're there. Like, what are you doing here? Well, we're here to get into your data center. not too many people want you in their data center without like
knowing
a
what
reason,
you're about.
what you're, I mean, especially classified information. And shit. So they would just tell us, just wait until we can figure this out. So there was literally 3 months where no work was done. I played SimCity, studied.
It's like mafia jobs.
Yeah, it's awesome.
The same
Show no work.
I mean, it's not only in his line of work. Like the same thing happened to us. Just like getting our equipment from one well site to the next.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do to transport all that equipment. So we would sit around for 2 months and wait for our equipment to get to the next place and
just wait.
And Congress knows damn well that this is happening. Here's the Commission on Wartime Contracting member Chris Shays speaking to former Senator Joe Lieberman 5 years ago.
Contracting became the default option, and we just did too much too quickly. And when you have an emergency supplemental, it's not part of the regular budget. It's almost like a free thing to draw money on. So we just grew too fast, and then we didn't change. After the first year, you've got a time where you say you can't keep doing it the way you were doing it, and we kept doing it the way we were doing it.
And if you had to give a reason why did we keep doing it the way we were doing it, even though people right there must have known it wasn't really working?
It's an easy option to just keep relying on contractors, and when you have a contractor who's performing, even if they're very, very, very expensive, you just want to keep going the way you're going.
Because they're doing the job.
They're doing their job, but at an extraordinarily high cost.
Very high.
Just quickly, having 15 people maintain electricity on a base when only 3 are being used. And they end up having so much free time that they decide to build themselves a clubhouse. They're working 12-hour days and only 3 are working, and we did that for years.
And nobody blew the whistle. I mean, it was pretty obvious that was happening.
Well, the Commission on Wartime Contracting blew the whistle 5 years ago in writing in 2 Congress's faces, and yet our contractors on the ground just a few months ago, this is what they told Ari Shafir.
It's a wait. Like, we're just throwing money into a fire. That's all we're doing.
There's no writing it.
No. I mean, like, in the stuff that we're doing doesn't make any sense. And I'm talking only about the time that I was in Afghanistan, not Iraq or anything like that. So, like we're just throwing money to building a building just to build the building. Like there's no rhyme or reason why we're building that. And like some of the housing wasn't even built yet. And by the time that it was built, we're leaving. Like, just make some common sense and stop the project.
Which again is wasteful behavior that Congress is well aware of. This is former Senator Joe Lieberman in 2011.
Some of the examples that particularly drove up my blood pressure, and I didn't have medication nearby, so it was particularly harmful. U.S. tax dollars paid $300 million to taxpayers, paid $300 million to build a power plant in Kabul, Afghanistan, that would supply the city with electricity around the clock. And the whole idea here was, build it, they will come, spur economic development. But the Afghan government couldn't afford the fuel to run the plant and instead contracted to buy electricity from Uzbekistan at a fraction of the price. And the power plant, built with $300 million American dollars, is now just an expensive backup generator. Another one that I thought was particularly outrageous was that $40 million of our money went to build a prison in Diyala province in Iraq that the Iraqis said they didn't want and ultimately refused to take possession of. Project was not only never completed, it was abandoned with $1.2 billion worth of materials left at the site.
And this is current Senator Claire McCaskill in 2013.
I learned just this week that the Defense Department spent millions to construct a building in Afghanistan that has never been used. This facility was built despite the fact that the forward commander said they neither needed nor wanted this facility. In May 2010, almost a full year before construction began. We now have a brand new state-of-the-art building that cost the taxpayers $34 million to build. The worst part is that all indications are we're going to tear it down. We can't even give it away to the Afghanistan government for free because they don't want a building that they will have to spend millions to rewire because it was built to U.S. electrical code.
And so that's all waste sanctioned by the Department of Defense. It's partially, if not mostly, their fault. But what happens when a contractor goes off the rails? What are the repercussions? Well, here's Senator Claire McCaskill speaking to Commission on Wartime Contracting member Clark Kent Irvin.
Heartbreaking incident in Iraq that I'm sure you all are aware of, where the negligence of one of our contractors killed one of our soldiers. And in trying to find justice for that family, the contractor avoided the jurisdiction of the United States. And the most insulting thing about it was he then got another company then got another contract with our government after they had used the fact that they were not subject to the jurisdiction of our country as a way to avoid justice for this man's family. We then decided we should sign up again with them. By the way, they are now accused of also doing business with Iran. So there's also some sanctions that need to be put in place as it relates to that. But one of you please talk about the importance of anybody who wants to do business with the United States. And what are the arguments on the other side, and why has the military been so reluctant to embrace this requirement?
May I start that?
Go for it.
Senator, as you know, one of the huge issues that we've dealt with during the course of the commission in particular is the lack of visibility with regard to subcontractors. And this lack of being subjected to United States jurisdiction is particularly acute for subcontractors. And it is our recommendation that as a condition for being awarded the subcontract by the prime contractor, that subcontractors in particular subject themselves by virtue of the contract to U.S. jurisdiction. You asked for the contrary argument, and quite frankly, I cannot think of one. This is American taxpayer money, and therefore the American taxpayer has a right to demand this level of accountability.
So subcontracting is when a company hires another company to do the work that they were hired for. So let's say, for example, and this is not based in reality, it's just out of my head, but let's say, for example, we hired KBR to do some work on some of our bases. But then they turn around and they hire a Nicaraguan company to send in people to do the actual work who are paid like 5 cents an hour. And they keep most of the money for themselves, these KBR people. Well, that foreign company from Nicaragua, we never signed a contract with them. And so if they screw us, there's nothing we can do. The contract was between them and KBR. We only signed a contract with KBR. And so when you try and go after these subcontractors that took our money, well, we're screwed. You know, these companies can basically take our money funneled through another company and tell us to go fuck off. And so here's Commission on Wartime Contracting member Charles Tiefer with some real life examples of this happening.
Let me mention 2 examples. One's Tamimi, one's First Kuwaiti, in what our hearings found and our missions was complete irresponsibility, that is, lack of responsibility by foreign contractors and especially subcontractors, as Commissioner Irvin said. Tamimi came before a hearing of ours. We asked them for records, and they basically laughed in our face. They said, "Go away. We're not going to give you records. We weren't required to give them to DCA. We're not required to give them to you." On a subject called tainted subcontracts. First Kuwaiti, which owed the government $124 million, according to the State Department IG, it's not paying. It's continuing to get contracts from it. It's not paying.
So we're allowing companies that screw us over to continue to get contracts for our taxpayer money. That's like having a maid who comes over to your house, takes a dump in the middle of your living room, and then hiring her to come back to do work next week. You would never do that. But with our taxpayer money, that is happening all the time. And it actually gets even worse from there. I'm sorry to tell you. Here's Robert Henke. He is one of the commission members on the Commission on Wartime Contracting, talking to Senator Joe Lieberman.
The fundamental principle is if you're going to have contractors carrying out parts of your foreign policy where it's appropriate, you'd better have vigorous government oversight. An example, the military establishes a joint contracting command in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's a good step forward. It's about 400 people with a brigadier general in charge of it. They realize, General Petraeus comes in and realizes he wants more contracting oversight. So he goes back to the services and says, Army, Navy, Air Force, send me more contracting officers. They say, we're tapped out. We don't have enough. We've deployed them 6 times and we can't break the force. So they try to get civilian, number one, so they fail on getting more military volunteers or not enough. Number 2, they ask for civilian volunteers. They can't find enough. They wound up staffing up the contracting command with contractors. to provide oversight of the contracting.
I mean, that's
crazy.
It's crazy and unacceptable.
And when you have contractors policing other contractors, sometimes stuff like this happens. This is Charles Tiefer, a commission member on the Commission on Wartime Contracting.
Our private security in Afghanistan appears to be a major source of payoffs to the Taliban. Our report has the first official statement that it's the second largest source of money for the Taliban.
After drugs.
After drugs, that's right.
But here's the basic bottom line of why this is happening. It's because we have this idea, a very popular idea, that something is always going to be done better by the private sector. And right now we are proving that that is not exactly true. But until that idea is openly fought back against and government is allowed to expand once again, yes, I'm arguing for a bigger government because when it comes to the military, contracting out what the military used to do itself hasn't worked out too well. Just ask, the people that are trying to fight the Taliban. So, until we're willing to allow the military to get back to the size that it needs to be to do all of these functions on its own, well, I don't think anything's going to get any better, and neither do the commissioners on the Commission on Wartime Contracting. This is Clark Kent Irvin.
It's critical that the government have a choice, and that means that there needs to be at least a small, organic and expandable organic capacity on the part of these three agencies to perform missions themselves. So the next time there's a contingency, the government has a choice between going with contractors and going in-house, and the determination can be made whether it's more effective to do it either way, whether it's cheaper to do it either way. As we said at the inception, right now the government doesn't have an option. Contractors are the default option because they're the only option.
And the conclusion that was drawn by all of the people on the Commission on Wartime Contracting, who, like I said, are not exactly like Bernie Sanders, liberal, hippy-dippy people. These are former Bush administration officials, for Christ's sake. This is what they concluded. Here's Senator Joe Lieberman talking to Dov Zakum, who, like I said, was part of the Bush administration. He was in the Department of Defense.
You had some hands-on experience in the Department of Defense. What can we do to stop this? Maybe I should ask first, I presume what you're saying is you think we're overusing private contractors to fulfill government functions.
I think we're all saying that. Yes, sir.
So there you go. They concluded we are using too many private contractors. The end. But not really the end, because now we have to look at where we're at today. That commission report came out 5 years ago. What's happening now? Well, from Ari Shafir's Skeptic Tank, this is what the contractor kid said.
I could get on a website and get a job today and still go back to Afghanistan. It's that easy to still get a job. It may not be $200,000, but you're still going to make $120,000.
Which totally checks out. I went on to Indeed.com and checked all the job openings. And if you look at contracting jobs, security jobs, like jobs in Afghanistan, there are so many available. Now, most of these companies are pretty smart. They don't list the salary on the actual internet, but some of them do. And I found one for a cable installer and technician for a U.S. base in Afghanistan. That job was for a U.S. based company, wouldn't tell me the name, and pays $10,000 per month, which is $120,000 a year. Dead on balls what this kid said he could make if he wanted to go back to Afghanistan right now. And then as for what to expect going forward, these people on Ari Shafir Skeptic Tank said a couple very interesting things. Here's one of them.
The hot place now is Egypt. Everybody, I think, is going to Egypt.
That's where people want to go?
Yeah, that's where the new money is.
So Egypt is kind of out of left field a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was like the contractors are going to Syria or like somewhere like that. But Egypt, I mean, that one kind of came out of left field. And so my knowledge of Egypt is quite surface. I definitely think after learning what I learned here that I should look into it more. But here's like a very basic idea of what's been going on recently in Egypt. So in January 2011, there was the Egyptian Revolution, all these protests, and we actually saw this on the news. It made it into the American media. And those protests led to the resignation of Egypt's president. And the president that was overthrown in 2011, he was kind of our guy. He assumed office in 1981 after the previous president was assassinated, so that's shady. And for over 30 years, he ruled the country basically as a dictator under a constant state of emergency. But because he was cool with Israel, we had been paying Egypt almost the entire time. We started giving Egypt $1.3 billion a year in 1987 and have been doing so ever since, even though this government couldn't have been less democratic. During his reign, the Egyptian constitution was suspended, the media was censored, and indefinite detention without trial for activists was common. There were thousands of people put in prison. And so this guy gets overthrown in January of 2011, and after a few months, there were elections. And so democracy in Egypt, yay! Although an Islamist named Mohammed Morsi won. Whoopsie, democracy was not exactly doing what the United States wants it to do. Now, this is the part where my spidey sense gets all like, did we have something to do with this? Because in July of 2013, that Islamist who won the elections was overthrown in a military coup. And now there's a military general, General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Now the military dude is in charge. And so I looked at a Congressional Research Service report that was published just 6 weeks ago at the end of February and found out that all of the money that we give to Egypt finances the procurement of weapons, so buying weapon systems and services from U.S. defense contractors. Every goddamn penny goes to contractors, all right? So that $1.3 billion that we've been giving them since 1987, that is in the government funding for 2016. So we're giving that to them again. There's also an additional $3.1 billion that can be split between Israel, Egypt, and Jordan. And it doesn't say how much can go to who. And then there's also an additional $150 million for a economic support fund that can be used in Egypt to create something called enterprise funds. And these funds are available for, quote, democracy programs, unquote, and for, quote, development programs, unquote. Now, the reason that those kind of like set off my this feels kind of regime changey is that there's a rule in the law, in the omnibus, that says that all of this money, whether it's the 1.3 billion, the 3.1 billion, or the 150 million, can't go to Egypt unless the government of Egypt is, quote, taking consistent and effective steps to stabilize the economy and implement market-based economic reforms, unquote. And we have seen this in country after country, that we are trying to give countries money to change their economic laws so that they're favorable towards multinational corporations. And so get this. It says expressly that the goals of these, enterprise funds are to further develop Egypt's private sector. So that totally goes along with implementing market-based reforms. We want to do this particularly in the agriculture and banking sector. And so the law that has to do with Egypt says that each of these economic enterprise funds, it says each fund, quote, shall be governed by a board of directors comprised of 6 private U.S. citizens and 3 private citizens of each country, respectively, who have had international business careers and demonstrated expertise in international and emerging markets investment activity, unquote. So this board of directors of this fund, it's mainly like U.S. people. Well, guess who some of those U.S. people are? The board of directors of this enterprise fund includes the chairman of the board of directors at Caterpillar. So like makes tractors and crap here in the United States. Also sitting on the board is the chairman of the international investment banking sector at Morgan Stanley and also the president of Goldman Sachs Foundation. So this just feels all kinds of shady. And then also in October of 2015, the U.S. and Egypt resumed a co-production deal of tanks at an Egyptian tank plant outside Cairo. It's General Dynamics is the primary contractor implementing the production of these tanks. And then Egypt has bought 10 helicopters, 2 fast missile crafts, whatever those are, and 12 F-16 fighter jets. So we see here that we're being told by these contractor kids that we have a lot of contractors going into Egypt. And since the government was overthrown in July of 2013, General Dynamics has gotten into the country. There are people very high up in our international banking system who are controlling money that goes to Egypt. And we're trying to get them to implement market-based economic reforms. So all of that stinks to high hell. That's basically what I'm saying. Another thing that the contractor kid said that I found incredibly interesting was this.
Another hotspot is Alice Springs, Australia.
Really?
They have a lot of
Where's that, in the middle?
Yeah, it's like top secret jobs, but I think there's quite a bit of like IT contracting.
So what's going on in Alice Springs, Australia, you ask? Well, there is a high security facility just outside of Alice Springs, Australia called Pine Gap. It's one of the largest satellite ground stations in the world. And at Pine Gap, we have people from the NSA, CIA, and U.S. geospatial intelligence agencies all working there. Also, all arms of the U.S. Armed Services also have personnel working at Pine Gap. Now, most interesting in the context of this episode is that contractors working for Northrop Grumman and Raytheon, along with the computer systems supplier Hewlett-Packard, are working there too. In fact, 70% of the total workforce are contractor personnel. So clearly, our government has learned nothing from the Edward Snowden affair, which is when a contractor, Edward Snowden was a contractor, when he leaked thousands of classified documents. Instead of having more of this work done in-house, we're still contracting out the extremely sensitive task of spying on the entire world. Also, the Sydney Morning Herald said that this facility at Pine Gap is also used to coordinate drone strikes in Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, and elsewhere. And, what's amazing to me is I pay so much attention to this type of stuff, and I had absolutely no idea that this facility existed until Ari Shaffir had two anonymous contractors on his podcast. The news has never told any of us about this. Kind of amazing. And so here we have documented that there is massive amounts of waste and just bad decisions going on in the Department of Defense when it comes to contracting. And so has Congress done anything? Well, yes, actually. In 2011, we had the Commission on Wartime Contracting issue their report. And in response to their findings, in the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, there were some provisions that had to do with contracting. Problem is they were really weak. So for instance, one of the strongest ones is that Congress needs to be informed if a company plans to subcontract more than 70% of the work they're given. Also, there's going to be documented performance reviews of contractors. However, there's nothing preventing those contractors that do a bad job from getting new contracts. The only thing that we're going to have now is documentation that they did a crappy job. And so that's kind of like the basis of everything that was done in 2012. There's lots of reviews and lots of reports, but no real prohibitions on what can be contracted. And there were certainly no limits on the amounts that can be spent. And so basically, when I looked at these provisions, I think the best way to summarize all of them is that these were provisions that were helping the next commission to gather their information to figure out what was going on. So fast forward now to the 114th Congress. What are they doing about this issue? Well, there's a gold star member of Congress in this entire thing here when it comes to contracting, and that's Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri. Like I told you earlier, when she was a freshman in 2007, she decided to come into the Senate and make this her baby. And so she ended up being the chairman of a subcommittee on financial and contracting oversight. It was a part of the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. So her subcommittee was responsible for creating that commission, and she was the one doing all these investigations. The hearing that I played for you today was from her subcommittee. And so when I looked into the 114th Congress, because, elections have consequences, and Claire McCaskill, the reason she was the chairman is because she was a member of the Democratic Party. And from 2007 until 2015, the Senate was controlled by Democrats. Well, we didn't show up to vote in 2014 and the Republicans took over the Senate. And so the chairmanships all changed. So I went to the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee website to see what her subcommittee is doing now. Who's in charge of it? What hearings have they had? What could we learn in the last year and a half? And you know what I learned? I learned the Subcommittee on Financial and Contracting Oversight no longer exists. The Republicans came into Congress and just deleted the entire subcommittee and all the work that it was doing. Now, what happened instead is that Claire McCaskill was given a seat on the subcommittee on investigations. And so what have they been investigating? Well, in the last year and a half, that subcommittee has had one hearing on Obamacare, 2 hearings on human trafficking, and 1 hearing about the tax code. They have not looked into government contracting at all. It is just not even a factor in the 114th Congress. And so if anything you heard today upsets you, what that means is that we have to vote in people who care about this type of waste, fraud, and abuse, and just, this funneling of taxpayer money to these companies. This is a major, major scandal. And the moral of the story for the 114th Congress is that they're doing nothing about it other than funding it. That's the only thing they care to do. So Congressional Dish is funded on the value for value model, which means that there's no advertisements. You know, we don't take any of your time and tell you about a product you don't need. And there's no corporate influence really in this podcast because there's no corporations paying for it. Instead, this is funded by the listeners. It's accountable only to the listeners. And the listeners are you. And the model that I'm working with here is called the value for value model. And the whole idea is that if you think that there's value in Congressional Dish, you're expected to return it in financial form. Now, I personally think that the information that I'm putting into this podcast is valuable in and of itself. But I also find that what is happening on a bigger picture is valuable too. And to show you what I'm talking about, I'd like to read you guys an email I got from one of our subscribers that I am so excited about. So here we go. It says, Jen, I have been a listener to Congressional Dish and recently became a monthly contributor at $5.42 a month. I wanted you to know that you've helped instill a renewed desire to not get lost in the golf swing of national presidential politics and focus on state and local politics, as well as the national do-nothing Congress. As a consequence of that, in your episode about getting on the ballots, I did a little digging and found that the incumbent state senator from my district had no opposition. As of the Tuesday before the filing deadline, I decided that if no one else would stand up to run, I would. I filed my paperwork on the filing deadline and am now a candidate for the Iowa State Senate. I want you to know that your work helped spark the investigation that led to the realization that my senator was running unopposed. If we're going to live in a democracy, it requires providing voters with a choice, and I'm excited to be able to give them that in November. While I'm running unopposed in the primary, at least voters will have a decision to make in the general election, and the incumbent won't just waltz back into office. I just want to thank you for all that you do and all the hard work that goes into each and every episode. If no one else ended up putting episode 118 to good use, at least there's me. In solidarity, Andrew Barnes, Iowa State Senate candidate in District 22. And his website is www.barnesforiowa.com. But I wanted to share that with you guys at this point in the episode because while he's thanking me for Congressional Dish, you need to be thanked too because Congressional Dish, it exists and it continues because of you. And look what happened. Someone put their name on the ballot. We have someone who listens to this podcast, one of us, who is running and is trying to change things. And I am so excited. So, Andrew, thank you for contributing to this show. Thank you for running for the Iowa State Senate. Thank you for letting us know that you're doing this. Just thank you, thank you, thank you. And, you know, to everyone who is contributing to Congressional Dish, congratulations, because you are making a difference. And I am so excited today to share this news with you. This is just wonderful. And if you're someone who's not contributing yet and you would like to be a part of this, because I can tell you I'm feeling really good right now, all you have to do is go to the support page on congressionaldish.com. And there's 3 big options. I mean, we do accept Bitcoin, but really most people are contributing either through PayPal. And with PayPal, you can either subscribe like Andrew did, which is it's monthly. And so the monthly subscribers are really helpful at this point that I do need to budget because while Congressional Dish is my career and I'm in this for the long haul, we are in our baby stages, especially financially. And where I'm paying an audio engineer and assistant, I do need to know how much I have coming in every month in order to consistently pay stuff out every month. So that's why the subscribers are so important. And then there's also the option to contribute one time. And that's really important too, because that's how I was able to go to social media marketing world is with that money. And then also you can do the same exact things. You can subscribe and you can send one-time contributions using physical checks and sending them to the Congressional Dish P.O. Box. That address is listed on the support page on congressionaldish.com. And what a lot of people are doing is using their online bill pay function to set this up. It's super, super easy. You can just pay Congressional Dish the same way you'd pay your cable bill or your internet or your phone or your rent or anything. You just, decide how much you want to contribute every month and it sends a check to me just like it sends a check everywhere else. And then, of course, you can do the same thing to contribute one time, whatever works for you. And then last, for those of you who don't feel that you have enough money to contribute in that way, but still want to contribute, there is a search box for Amazon on congressionaldish.com. And so if you go to congressionaldish.com and search for whatever you're planning to buy through congressionaldish.com, whatever you put into your cart after entering Amazon in that way, well, Congressional Dish will get a commission on all of those items in your cart. And so that does add up and it does help. And it's an option for those of you who want to contribute, but don't want anything coming out of your pocket. So those of you who are using Amazon, thank you very much. It actually is helping. But yeah, to everyone who is contributing Congressional Dish, we did something good here. We have a Congressional Dish team member on a ballot in Iowa, and I am so excited. So thanks again, Andrew, and thank you to everybody who's helped making this possible. And so now's the part of the show where I thank the people specifically who are making this possible. And first I would like to thank Ari Shafir one more time. He did give me permission to use the clips from his podcast. And, the thing about Ari Shafir's Skeptic Tank, some of the episodes are just for fun, but I've just found him to be one of the more interesting podcasters out there. He's fearless, and he's done some experiments that I have actually been inspired from. So, some of you might remember that about a year and a half ago, I was doing some episodes. They were hearing episodes where I sat and I watched a hearing with a friend, and those were really fun. And I think the technology is going to catch up to the point that I can go back to doing those again. But it was difficult on a lot of levels. But the thing that kind of drove me to try that idea is that Ari Shafir went to a Yankees game with a friend and did a podcast while watching the game. And I listened to the whole thing, even though there were parts of it where they really weren't saying anything at all. My favorite part, there was some drunk girl sitting behind them that interrupted their podcast. And so it was just really entertaining. And it was just two guys, shooting the shit at the baseball game. And I just found that to be such an interesting concept. And it kind of led me to try that whole hearing thing. And then one of the most powerful episodes of a podcast I've ever heard was the episode he did just a few months ago on 9/11. And he interviewed for 4 hours a first responder who was a friend of his. And that is the most moving thing I've ever seen or heard about 9/11. Nothing has made me feel that close to the experience of what it must have been like to be in New York that day as Ari's 9/11 episode. I mean, you will cry if you listen to it, but it was a very powerful episode. And then to hear the one that I did, that you heard pieces of today, he's one of the people that I look up to. And I think his podcast is really well done. And which is really funny because I think that he doesn't put that much thought into it. He puts plenty of effort into it, but he does what he wants. And that kind of fearlessness is something I think a lot of us podcasters can admire. So Ari, not that I expect you'll ever hear this, but if you do, thank you for not only your interview with those defense contractors, but for everything you do. I do admire your work. I also want to let you know that I went on a couple of podcasts and I want to thank them for having me. I went on Future Money Trends. This is not the first time that I've been on that podcast, but it is hosted by Ken Amaduri, and we always have really good conversations, and so that was a fun one. And then I went on Liberty on Point, which is a relatively new podcast hosted by Tony Bottoms, and this one was really fun for me. Tony is a Congressional Dish listener, and he's a trucker, and he's about to be promoted, as you'll hear on the show, but he is a trucker, and so I didn't realize that, and I don't know why I didn't think of it, but there's a lot of truckers that listen to a lot of podcasts, and Tony was one of them. Is how he discovered the show, and now he has a podcast of his own. And I just found him to be so refreshing. And one of my favorite parts of our discussion is, he's from Oklahoma and I'm from California, and with the whole red-blue divide and the way that the media tells us how America is, you would think that we would fight the entire time, and we didn't at all. We approached our conversation from a place of let's find what we agree on and go from there. And it was so pleasant, and it just gave me so much faith that people in this country are not as divided as we're being told. And so I loved that conversation, and the links to both of those conversations are available in the show notes for this episode. So check those out. And I hope that you enjoy those as much as I did. Okay, so now I'd like to thank the people who have contributed since the healthcare episode. And honestly, this isn't going to take very long because it was a really dry 2 weeks. I'm hoping it's just because that this is the time of year everyone paid their taxes, and so they're really angry about the amount of money coming out of their accounts, because I liked the healthcare episode. So I tend to take this personally when I do an episode and there's not a lot of money coming in afterwards. I tend to blame the episode beforehand. And I don't know if that's accurate or not, if I should be doing that, but this is this will be quick. It was not, support was not great, but the people who did chip in because of that level of support, this is even more important. And so we did get some new subscribers. We're getting $15 a month now from Andrew Epperson. Thank you very much, Andrew. We also got a raise, which is always fun, from current subscriber Laura Adona. She was contributing $2 a month, and it's now up to $6 a month. So thank you, dear. We are also now getting $5 a month from Richard Mon, and he is from Boston. He says, thanks for your hard work. Thank you very much, Rich. Also, Graham Kimmel is now contributing $2 a month and left a note. He said, hi, Jen. I've been a listener since you did your AMA on Reddit and love the show. I'm finally in the position where I'm not pinching every penny and can regularly donate to the show. Just want to say keep up the good work. Also, I work in the airline industry and I'm pretty up to date on a lot of the regulatory goings on in the flight safety related topics. I know you have lots of people that do research, but if you ever need any insight in that oddly specific area, I would be happy to help, unquote. Thank you very much, Graham. And actually, to tell you the truth, there is not a lot of people that help me with research. I do most of it on my own, which is something that I'm trying to change with this Facebook Live experiment. And again, the next episode will be on internet related bills. So whether you or not you know anything about it, come and check it out with me, because I'm not an expert on every single topic that Congress legislates on. I'm starting, especially with something like the internet, kind of a clean slate. And so we can research this stuff together. And, the reason that I'm telling you this is that there has been some stuff about transportation and flight safety. I know that there's a bill that's moving through the Senate right now about the FAA. And I will have to do an episode on the big transportation bill that passed in December. It was signed into law. And so we're going to have to do some work on that too. So I'm really hoping in the next few months to be able to collaborate with more people and maybe speed up and improve the research side of what I'm doing here for Congressional Dish, because there is so much information that people like you have that I could capitalize on and we could work together. And I think we're now at the point that that's possible. So like I said, the internet episode, I will be going on Facebook on, it's going to be Monday, May 2nd at 2 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll go as long as we go. So go ahead to the Congressional Dish Facebook page, like it, and then when we're live, it should show up in your feed. This is the first time I'm doing it too, so if it's all weird and janky, you can watch me not know what I'm doing, and that should be fun for a few people. And you'll get to know what I look like. A lot of people don't know what I look like, so you'll see what I'm like at home, and don't expect much, but anyway, thank you, Graham. Thank you to all our new PayPal subscribers. We also have a few people who have sent in physical checks, and we have confirmed that these are subscribers. So $15 a month is coming in a paper check form from Michael Matthews. And we're also getting $10 a month from each Robert Natchez from, I think that's MS. Is that Mississippi? I think we have too many states in this country that begin with M, because when you do the abbreviations, I know probably half of them, but MS, I think it's Mississippi. I don't know. But anyway, thank you for the $10 a month. We're also getting $10 a month from Nicholas Reese of Nashville, Tennessee, and $10 a month from Kyle Winfield of Cedar Park, Texas. So thank you very much, guys. All of you are guys. But that's it for new subscribers. So if you would like to add to that list, please subscribe by going to the support page on congressionaldish.com. Now, we also got a decent amount of one-time contributions, and the largest one by far was $500 from an anonymous friend, and I'm just going to leave it at that, but you know who you are, and I appreciate you so much. Yeah, I can't say anymore, but thank you very much. You know who you are. We also got $75 from Chelsea Nye. Thank you, Chelsea. We got $60 from David Hollingshead. Thank you, David. We got another $50 from our good friend Stephen McMahon, and he left a note which says, Jen, sorry this month is a little late. Put off taxes and bills as long as I could. How depressing paying the assholes in Washington for not doing their jobs. In your spare time, what books do you have in your library? Only asking so I don't duplicate what you have in your library if I send you something. If you don't feel comfortable sharing, don't worry. Steve McMahon of Montana. Stephen, I feel comfortable sharing pretty much everything, so don't worry about that. Wow, I have a lot of books in my library. If you're asking in order to not send me duplicates, you can always go to the Congressional Dish wish list on Amazon.com, because I know that I added like at least 5 or 6 books that I wanted to buy onto there. So if you guys are looking to send me things, that's anytime I want a book, I just put it on the wish list and it just magically appears for me. And it's great when that happens, but that's how you can know what I'm looking for. And then on my shelf right now, oh boy, I have so many books. I mean, if you're asking for recommendations, 3 of my favorites are from David K. Johnson. These are about taxes. So I'm not going to call them dry because it's about taxes, but it's about like loopholes and how Congress has really rigged the tax code in favor of corporations. And then also how we're getting screwed by like the fine print in these contracts that we sign with companies. And so David K. Johnson has 3 books and I recommend every single one of them. The first one was Free Lunch. That's probably 10 years old by now. But then there's also Perfectly Legal and The Fine Print. All 3 of those books are really good. Blackwater was a riveting story and also goes in very well with this episode about defense contracting. Like I mentioned last week, there's The Brothers, which my husband just read and he really liked it too. This is about the Dulles brothers, which is John Foster Dulles, who was the Secretary of State, and his brother Alan Dulles, who was the director of the CIA at the same time in the 1950s. So that book was just wild. I didn't know so much of that history. Angler by Barton Gellman is really good. That's a book about Dick Cheney that really, it was written in a way that wasn't like, he's a monster. It just made me understand where he came from and why he is the person that he is. Really, really enjoyed Angler. Of course, there's the Shock Doctrine, which literally changed my life by Naomi Klein. If you read anything, read that one. Although it's tough to get through. It's depressing and the stories are long. But if you want to know about our history of, toppling governments to get our way, the Shock Doctrine is just amazing. And and then here's another one, Grifftopia by Matt Taibbi. Although read everything by Matt Taibbi. He's a writer for Rolling Stone, but he did an excellent job of looking into the financial crisis and explaining that stuff in a way that anyone could understand. And yeah, so anything written by Matt Taibbi, go for it. But yeah, if you want to buy me stuff, again, that's the wish list on Congressional Dish. Nope, not on congressionaldish.com. It's on amazon.com. And that's how you can find out what I am looking for. But thanks, Stephen. Always appreciate your checks and your note. We also got, let's see. Oh, Steve McMahon also contributed 27.05 cents via PayPal. And he said, love the show. Amount has no special meaning, just what was left in the account. Thanks, Steve. That's funny. Let's see. We also got $40 from Gregory Koch, not your first contribution. So thank you. Another $40 from Patrick McDonald. Thank you, Patrick. We got $40 via PayPal from David Krolik, and he also sent me a letter in the mail. So this is from David. He said, "Hi, Jen. First, I want to say how sorry I was to hear about the loss of your brother-in-law. Your words at the end of the episode were very moving and a fitting eulogy memorial. I hope you can repeat them at whatever service the family has planned. His kids probably won't appreciate it now, but when they get older, I think it would be good for them to know their dad was so highly regarded. Reminding them of your thoughts about their dad periodically through their lives will be an important job for you. Please pass my condolences to your husband." David, thank you very much. And actually, we've gotten a lot of people sending their condolences, and it's meant a lot to me. And what meant a lot too is that we had a lot of people go to the memorial fund and contribute for the family, and that really blew me away. So I probably should have thanked you guys at the beginning of the episode, but thank you for the messages and for everything. It's been hard. And I don't know, the memorial is planned. It's going to be in the middle of May. So we're kind of going through the planning right now and trying to figure out who's going to speak. And right now, none of us feel like we'll be able to get through it without crying. And so I really don't know what's going to happen, but I do have a couple more weeks to kind of think about that and figure that out. But yeah, just thanks for saying that. That's really, really sweet. Back to David's message. It says, "My intention was to contribute to Congressional Dish another $25. My financial circumstances have not been great, but I hope that this will improve. Your episode about the European Union was excellent. I believe that we can't remind people often enough how, despite the stories and propaganda to the contrary, that we in the USA have often been bad actors. Regularly, we make awful situations worse or even make okay situations bad to begin with. Episode 123 was also top notch. That's the health one. So I'm glad you liked it. I didn't know if people liked it. You're doing such great work, and I want to help you pay for the assistance you are now getting and potentially even more help in the future. My plan is to send $25 every 3 months, finances permitting. That's great. I don't know if you want to count this as a subscription, but I promise to send what I can on a regular basis. Between taxes and some other bills, I'm not able to draw from my checking account, so I can't do it through bill pay at my bank and will have to do this through PayPal. Keep a lookout for it. I will make it for $40 so you can split it and contribute $20 for the fund for Nathan's family. Peace, David Krolik from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you. And I will chip in that extra $20 to the fund in your name. So thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you. Just thank you. It's very, very sweet. We also got $25 from Ishmael Santiago, and he left a message on PayPal. It says, "Hi, Jennifer. Your show is a great contribution. We live in fast-paced, hectic times that call for earnest people that help us catch up with information that really matters. I heard you on the first time on the Higher Side Chats with Alex Jones, who I heard on, and then your message got cut off by PayPal. So I have definitely been a guest on the Higher Side Chats, but the host of that is actually Greg Carlson, not Alex Jones. Alex Jones has his own show, although Alex Jones has been interviewed by Greg on the Higher Side Chats, so that's probably where the confusion was. But I've been on the Higher Side Chats a few times. I always love talking to Greg. It's so much fun. But I'm glad that you told me where you found the show from, and thank you for the $25. That's very nice of you. We also got another contribution, this time $20 from our good friend Mikhail in Russia. He left a message, said, "Hi, Jen, catching up with my $10 a month subscription. Keep up with your great work. From Russia with love and best wishes. Regards, Mikhail." Thank you, my friend. We also got $10.30, which is a very popular contribution from Angela Fletcher. And she left a note, says, "My name is Angela Fletcher. I'm from Puerto Rico. This donation is from me and the freeloader named Ishmael that told me about your show. I want to start sending paper checks just because I like hearing you say paper checks. I might start a drinking game with ... it was cut off by PayPal." And then she sent a follow-up email which says, quote, "My note got cut off on PayPal. And when I read it, I realized that said show but meant episode. Language barrier, I guess. Anyway, I wrote that I'm hooked to your podcast and you're doing an extraordinary job. Thank you. Also, if you can in the future, I would love to hear if you have some insight into what's going on with Puerto Rico and Congress. There's a lot of terrifying solutions being thrown around, and it would be great to hear your take on it. I will respect whatever your point of view may be. Thank you for your hard work." Angela, that's a really, really good suggestion because I have seen a lot going on with Puerto Rico. And right now, I mean, that's going to have to be an episode all by itself because I don't understand why Puerto Rico is one of our territories at all. I know that Puerto Rico has a delegate in Congress who's not allowed to vote. So it's almost like you guys are one of our states, but not really. And I'd really like to know the history of that. And I would also love to know what Congress is trying to do to you. So if anything passes, I will definitely do an episode on that because Puerto Rico, you're kind of part of the United States and I should know what that means. So thank you. I'm glad to know you're listening and I will keep that in mind for future episodes. All right. We also got $10, so these people are monthly subscribers. This is Ethan Risto and his lovely wife, Linda. And they are monthly subscribers, but they kicked in an extra 10 and left a note. Said, "Jen, I listened to the cybersecurity program and I thought it was golf swing brilliant. You're doing such a great service and I'll continue to listen no matter how often you can do the show. On the payment side of it, I upped my subscription amount because I was finding that I was sending additional payments almost every time I listened to an episode. I also changed to having the payment come from my bank and not my card. Hang in there and keep up the great work. Sincerely, Ethan Risto." And thank you for that. And also, just so you know, the paper checks, a lot of people are switching from PayPal to paper checks, and that's good because PayPal, it's super convenient. If you're someone like me who racks up airline miles and uses your credit card for everything, it's a really good option for people who want to pay with credit card. But PayPal does take a 3% cut. If you send a physical check, well, PayPal doesn't take a cut, and also your big bank pays for the stamp. So you kind of stick it to your bank in that small way, and you can kind of help out the post office because you're giving them a little bit of business. So I really like the whole paper check thing for some silly reasons, but I do like paper checks. Thank you, Ethan. We also got another card from my good friend Bud Johnson, and this time there was two cards and a note. He said, in the card it says, Jen, so sorry about Nathan. My condolences. Here's an extra $5. Love to you and your family, Bud. Thank you, Bud. You're so sweet. And then there's a second note, this on Bud's new printer. And this note comes along with a $5.24 check. And it says, the Eastern Bloc countries added were part of the old USSR. Russia used to be considered a part of Europe. A Grexit is still possible, which you covered. The Dulles brothers, sadly, are what we live with in 2016. I too suggest David Talbot from Salon in the book The Devil's Chessboard. Save your eyes and get the audiobook. It is long. Thank you. That's a good idea. He said CD124 is an excellent show. I admit that I'm having a bit of a political burnout. In turn, I get grandiose in wanting to destroy the MIC. Keep rocking, your pal, Bud. Thank you, Bud. And I am considering getting an Audible account. I don't have one yet, but I do have more books than I feel like I can read after doing all of this reading online. So maybe I will start doing audio. I don't really know. We'll see. But thank you, Bud. I always love your cards. We also got $10 from Lisa Seberg of Senatoba, MS. Damn it. Is that Mississippi? Ugh, now I have to look it up. MS is Mississippi. Yes, I actually know things. All right. So Lisa of Mississippi, thank you for the check. And then we got another $10 from our good friend Patrick Cardone. And this one comes with a happy face. So thank you, Patrick. And we got also $7 from Shauna Cold Iron. And this was a physical check that had an email attached. It said, hey, Jen, first, let me thank you from the very bottom of my heart for what you're doing and what you have been doing. My name is Shauna and I'm 24 years old, living in St. Louis, Missouri, originally from North Judson, Indiana. I've been listening to your podcast for about a month now and I can't get enough. I first heard you appear on an episode of Talk Nerdy, and once it was finished, I had to jump over and subscribe to you and start from the very beginning. I'm so sorry for what you heard in the very beginning. I don't have the attention span for reading these bills, but I can binge listen to you sum them up for me daily. What's cool is that I can listen all day at work because I sit at a computer designing teeth all day. I work at a dental lab. So I get to listen to your podcast at work, and then on the weekends, I've been looking up what I've heard and taking notes. I want to be sure of who I'm voting for this time because it's clear by the bills just purposed that we need to be making a change and making it now. I think that I've been understanding what I've been trying to learn for the most part, but I've run into a few areas of confusion. If you have the time, would you mind discussing these with me? What's going on before the primary? I think Missouri is August. Why do some states hold preference and others caucus? What the hell happens with delegates in the Electoral College? I don't understand. Okay. Here's the main thing to know about the primary, which will make a lot of this easier to understand. The primaries are party things. The primaries are not constitutional elections. The parties make the rules. So if you're voting in the Republican Party, they make the rules and they leave a lot of the details up to the states. So that's why the dates are all over the place. A lot of the southern states, for instance, they wanted to kind of count more. And so they moved up a lot of their primary dates. Where I'm a California resident, we've been voting in June for as long as I can remember. So it's all up to the states. But the main thing to realize, like when you see that these systems that are being designed and operated by the Republicans and Democrats, if those systems feel rigged, well, it's because you're voting in their club. They decide what they do. And you're going to see some really weird stuff in the conventions in July, because that's really where they pick their nominees. Because when you vote in a primary for both parties, and you're voting for delegates, but the delegates are really decided at the conventions. It's all super confusing. I can't tell you that I really understand the details that well because I'm really not trying, because I don't participate in either of those parties. I mean, I vote in June and I'm going to vote here in California for Bernie Sanders because I've been following Bernie Sanders I've been aware of him for 10 years. He's never changed his tune or his opinion. And while doing this show, I have seen him go into Congress, like with the hepatitis drugs that the pharmaceutical companies were charging like $1,000 per pill. And I was really angry about that, especially when I found out the history. And sure sure enough, I'm watching some hearing and in comes Bernie Sanders. And he was really mad about those $1,000 pills. And his suggestions made sense to me. So it's like when I see a congressman doing work like that really does represent me, and that person is running for president, I'm definitely going to vote for that person, especially when he's running against Hillary Clinton, who has never seen a war she doesn't support. So yes, I'm voting for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic side because basically it's the circus over on the Republican side. So yeah, I'm going to go and like crash their club. But really, when the primaries, those parties are going to do what they're going to do. And so we just need to learn our lesson that, you know, if you don't like the way they're running the primaries, don't participate in their primaries in their system. Don't vote for those parties. When it comes to the Electoral College, that's something that goes back to the beginning of our country. That is also wicked confusing. And I can't tell you the details of it off the top of my head because I don't understand it that well. Maybe that's an episode I can do right before the election so we understand what we're looking at. But I hope that helps a little bit, just to know that the delegate stuff is confusing on purpose because the party leaders just want to do what they want to do. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Back to your note, it said, in one of the episodes I heard today, somewhere in the 60s, you mentioned a newsletter or something similar. I think it linked in a way to how your representatives voted. Am I remembering right? And if so, do you still have that link and could you send it my way? Oh, John C. Dvorak is going to love your question. I had a newsletter and I have been basically treading water for so long now that I stopped writing the newsletter. It was just too much work. The newsletter is coming back. So if you have ever if you've subscribed or contributed via PayPal, I already have your email, and when the newsletter comes back, you'll automatically get it. If you want to be someone who gets that newsletter, you can sign up for it on the right-hand side of congressionaldish.com, and you will get it when I restart it sometime in the near future. As for how your representatives voted on each of these bills, that is information you can find in each episode's show notes. So you'll see that in any episode that has a bill outlined in it, you can see the outline of that bill, and you'll see a lot of links too, because I link to the individual parts of the bills, so that not only can you find out what bill I'm talking about, you can find the provisions in order to check my work. And at the end of each bill, I give you the vote counts. So you can click on that and find out how your representative voted. So that's how you can get that information without the newsletter. Back to her note, you said, your show has shown me there are so many ways I can make my voice count. It takes work, homework as I call it, but damn, it is important. Thanks again. You are truly appreciated, Shauna Cold Iron. And she said, P.S. I love that you've given all of us the tools to fact check and that you are the first to admit when you realize you were wrong. That says volumes of your character. Oh, you are great. I wish I could donate more. I did a little last week and will do so again when feasible. Happy face. So thank you very much, Shauna. And then let's see, we also got $5 from David Disser of San Diego, California. Sorry, I missed you. I was just in your hometown. We got least, we got $4 from PayPal. Joel Blazik is the person's name. I'm losing my ability to speak English today. And also, one last thing. Sorry, I forgot. We also got a 6-outlet thingy, an adapter from my outlet from Alex Thompson, who said, enjoy your gift. And this is really good because I have been plugging in my phone across the room and I just can't have that. I need to have my phone next to my head at all times so that I can Twitter in the middle of the night, first thing in the morning, feed my unhealthy obsession. So thank you, Alex. You are helping me feed my addiction. All right. That's it for today. Thank you so much for everyone who contributed. If you would like to help out the show, like I said at the beginning, the podcast awards are going on right now. The way it works is between now and April 30th, we need people to nominate the show. And so you only have to nominate the show once. You go and you fill out the little form there at www.podcastawards.com. And when you see the news and politics category, the name of the show is Congressional Dish and the URL is www.congressionaldish.com. Pretty easy. And don't forget to nominate the rest of your favorite shows while you're there. And all right. And so the next thing that we have coming up in the Congressional Dish world is I would like your help if you would like to do the Facebook Live thing with me and, help me research what they're trying to do to the internet. So again, that's going to be on Facebook. Go ahead and like the Congressional Dish Facebook page in order to have access to this. And this is going to be 2 p.m. Pacific time on Monday, May 2nd on Facebook. All right. As always, I appreciate you guys. Hope all is well. I'm going to Seattle for a week. You might see some tweets about that, but I will be back to do the next episode the first week of May. Take care, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye.
We're surrounded now by liars coming at us through our TV screens.
We don't have a domestic spying program.
They're content to fight in black and white despite the many in-betweens. We got a president who plays with the facts. What the facts? And then he waves a flag to cover his tracks. As if a lie is alright, if the end will justify the means. Now we are so damn tired of being lied to.
The polar ice caps aren't going away.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. We are so damn tired of being lied to.
Government jobs consume the profits of the private sector.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. Now we're not keeping quiet.
These bills represent common sense, bipartisan